You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show. The preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Welcome to the show, my family and friends. We certainly appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in, as always. We just did our numbers where we pulled the last 4 years of the Chris Voss Show, and we've increased our audience by over 1,405%. That's 1,405%. And if you don't think we're not going to brag the hell about that until the end of time, or at least the numbers go higher, you're not even kidding yourself. So we made a major change to the format in, what was it? 2000, February and March of 2000 with COVID. We decided we were going to change the world, quit talking about Silicon Valley crap all the time and CEO interviews of big companies, and open the scope up to everyone so that we can educate the world and make the world a better place. And that's what we have now. The CEOs, the billionaires, the White House presidential advisors, the astronauts, the people who write amazing books, stories, Pulitzer Prize winners. They bring to you their stories of life, their cathartic moments, their lessons of life, because as we always say on the Chris Voss Show, the owner's manual to life are life's stories. I actually said it a different way, but we decided to reverse it this time. So anyway, we always have the most amazing people and minds here on the show, and I learned so much from the show. And if you don't, well, then you need to go back and listen to the damn shows, because Jesus Christ, we have some amazing people on here. And we have one again today, and it's not me, as always. I'm just the idiot with the mic. I think that's what we're going to rename the podcast, An Idiot with a Mic, with really amazing guests. Matthew Zakreski is on the show with us today. He is a doctor of neurodivergence and mental health expert. We're going to be talking to him about his insights and how we can learn from some of the things that he does. He is referred to as Dr. Matt. He's a psych doctor. I believe that's what PSD means. PSYD means. Is that what that means, Matt?
Clinical psychologist. Yeah.
Clinical psychologist. There you go. I'm not up on the lingo, since I'm usually on the other side of the room of psychologists rather than being in their chair. He is a high energy, creative clinical psychologist and a professional speaker who utilizes an eclectic approach to meet the specific needs of his neurodivergent clients. He is proud to serve as the gifted community, as a consultant and professor and an author and researcher. He's spoken over 400 times about all over the world about supporting neurodivergent people. He is also a frequent podcast guest. He can be found on many different platforms. He graduated from Widener University's Institute for Graduates Clinical Psychology in 2016. He is a co-founder of the Neurodiversity Collective, which provides therapy, IQ testing, coaching, and consulting. Clearly, I need some of that. Welcome to the show, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. I'm never the second most energetic person in the room. So this is new for me. I'm like, let's go. I've run through a wall for you, Chris Voss.
There you go. Let's do it. Let's go conquer the world. Let's go put it in the universe. We'll kick over some stuff. But first, we'll do it on the show. But our audience loves guests that have energy. So thank you for coming and bringing it. Give us the .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
So if you want me to come and speak to your organization, whether it's a school or a business or a community organization, Boy Scout troop, whatever it might be, that's drmattzakreski.com. If you hear what we have to talk about today, be like, yes, that's the kind of therapy I need, then the therapy practice is the neurodiversitycollective.com. I try to keep them separate because Dr. Matt is the brand, but you only get me if you want me to do a speaking thing. If you want therapy, well, I have a whole team of awesome people that you could talk to.
There you go. There you go. So let's lay a foundation on some terms and stuff. And we got your .com, right, where people could pull up the .com. I think we did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I always make sure of that because the .coms are important. You got to get the plugs. It's all about the plugs, people. Go ahead. What?
Yeah.
There you go. So tell us, let's lay a foundation of what neurodivergence means, and what that's up to, and how you work in that sphere.
Yeah. So there are broadly speaking, there are two different kinds of brains in the world.
Mhm.
There are neurotypical brains. About 70% of people are neurotypical. The brains are largely within what we would expect a brain to do for your age and what the world depends on you to do.
There you go. And then there's the people on Facebook and Twitter. Is that the other
Yeah.
brains?
And then yes, you read the YouTube comments section, you go, oh God.
There's the other brains. No, I'm just kidding.
That's when we get into personality disorders. That's a whole separate podcast episode.
Bipolar.
Don't worry, I'll come back. And then people with different brains are the remaining 30%, and that's ADHD, autism, OCD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, giftedness, which is my primary area of expertise.
Mhm.
But the more we learn about this, the more we realize, oh my gosh, like I can snapshot a picture of your brain and be like, check this out. That's what an ADHD brain looks like. And then people read it and they go, oh, because you still talk to people, you still hear people who are like, I'm ADHD. I mean, that's just bad parenting. And I'm like, oh, I want to scream and throw this lovely cup of water you've given me across the room, but I'm just going to sit here nicely until you stop talking so then I can talk.
There you go. Well, I'm glad to know I'm in the exceptional higher class of the 30%, because no one wants to be with everyone else. And I'm an ADHD client, and also, I don't know, there's a joke there somewhere about hair. But now, does that include people on the spectrum, autism, savants, things like that?
Sure does.
There you go. There you go. So I'm glad to be in the company of everyone on that 30%. I have what they normally term the CEO disease, the ADHD, and while it can be a curse, it's made me a lot of goddamn money. So
let's go, right?
Absolutely. Yep. It's unlike my first 10 marriages that were just a curse. No, I'm just kidding, people. It's a joke. I've never been married. So give us a 30,000 overview of like the work that you do and kind of what you're engaged in and what you're trying to accomplish out there in the world.
So it all started with therapy, right? I mean, so I was seeing a lot of gifted kids, a lot of what we call twice exceptional kids, kids with a gifted IQ and some other learning difference, another neurodivergence, ADHD, autism, that sort of thing. And the more I did that, the more I started going to conferences to learn more. And I was in these conferences and I kept thinking to myself, well, I could do that. I could probably do that better than them. So I started putting my words out there and people started responding to it. And that turned into, oh, I'll do some breakout sessions, to, oh, you want me to come talk to your school, to, oh, you want me to be the featured speaker at your conference, to, oh, you're flying me to Europe to give 6 talks across a 4-day international event. Well, I could do that. Words am good I am could do that. And yes, right. It's still a little bit like terrifying and a little bit surreal, but the more I do it, the more people want me to do it. And I realize there are a lot of people out there who are carrying around these neurodivergent brains who don't know. And there's one of my favorite things to say is there's a lot of value in knowing that you're a zebra, you're not a weird horse.
There you go. You're not a weird horse.
Right. A lot of people walking out there going like, why is it that all the other horses are doing this thing and I don't do that?
Yeah.
It might just be because you're a zebra.
I think it was Carl Jung, or it was one of those psychologist dudes. You probably know who it is, but they made a statement that the only measure of sanity is that the fact that the largest group of people who claim to have the most sanity and the smaller group must be insane, thereby by population, is the only measurement of sanity. But it doesn't mean we're all sane. Do you know who that was? I don't know.
I'd have to dig through. It's in there somewhere.
I think it was Carl Jung, or one of those guys who had a mother issue or something. But basically, I grew up in society being called the dumb horse because of the way I was. A lot of boys have trouble in school now because there's hardly any men in school, and so they're being called dysfunctional girls and treated as dysfunctional girls. We've had a lot of psychologists on that have talked about that and written books. There's a lot of up until a lot of time, people were thought of as being that were on the spectrum, or autism were thought as mentally less, or viewed as mentally less. And so it's great that we're having these discussions. I mean, most of the savants, the most smartest people in the world, are on the spectrum, are autistic, and they're smart. They can run circles around all of us. So Matthew, how did you give us a little bit of background on you and your words? How did you grow up? Are you part of the 30%, or are you in the 70?
No, I sure am. I mean, and like I think a lot of people in my field, this work is personal and professional,
There
right?
you
I mean, I grew up as a gifted kid in Jersey in the 90s, and
go.
people kept using the word Einstein, they kept using the word Harvard, and all I felt from that was pressure.
Mm.
Like, well, gosh, I guess I have to be perfect or the world will end. You know, and then I got diagnosed with ADHD in high school, which frankly explained a lot, um,
Ah.
because I was getting a lot from my teachers, like, well, if you're so smart, how come you can't dot dot dot? And I'm like, well, everyone tells me all the time how smart I am, so there must be something wrong with me.
Yeah, you feel that, huh?
Yeah. In the
Yeah.
absence of information, we create our own narratives,
Mhm.
and those narratives tend to be catastrophic,
Yeah.
right?
And
You
we
know,
used to have this world that was really black and white.
mm,
You'd probably say that in a lot of ways, actually, if you look back at the 50s and 60s. But I mean, it used to be probably a good example of is the IBM man of the 50s, where everyone had to show up in black suit, black tie, black shoes, black hat, and you couldn't you couldn't bring any colors or anything like that. Everyone had to fit the same form. And I always have this picture in my mind of the Pink Floyd's music video, "We Don't Need No Education," or I think it's called something else. But basically, these children are being walked through British schools in this lockstep machinery, one size fits all punch out. And I think a lot of us, in the crowd of being in that 30% spectrum, we got treated like what did you say, the stupid pony or the stupid horse,
yeah,
through school, and it definitely impacts your self-esteem, your ability to want to learn or care.
absolutely.
Hmm.
And then, because if you're not framing this through the lens of you have a different brain,
Hmm.
then it defaults to it's either your fault as the kid or it's your parents' fault.
Hmm.
It's like a teacher isn't going to say, well, clearly I can't teach you. And the administrators aren't going to say, well, clearly our system is broken and can't fix kids like this.
Hmm.
So it's a real problem because the target defaulted to the kid, and that's too much
Hmm.
burden for any kid to carry. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I say this all the time. Neurodivergence is not an excuse, right? I'm not going to let you say, well, I can't get a good job because I have ADHD. No, it's context, right? There's a reason so many of us end up in person-facing gigs like
Hmm.
bartending or being a barista or hosting a podcast or being a professional speaker, right? You don't want your ADHD or to be your accountant. I
Hmm.
mean, my accountant definitely does not have ADHD, and he's
Yeah, you
brilliant
don't.
at his job. I'm not sure if I want to go on a bachelor party with him, but he's stable and secure and very consistent. And I want my lawyer, my accountant, and my surgeons to have that
Yeah,
personality.
you don't want your surgeon doing the surgery on your heart, and he's like, "Squirrel."
Oh,
Yeah.
was I doing something? Right. And then we're, flat. Boop.
What's this heart thing?
My one of my favorite theater professors in high school, when I told her that I had gotten into improv and stand-up comedy and ultimately professional speaking, she was like, well, of course. She's like, you can say other people's words, but you were always best saying your own words. And I mean, if that's not the ADHD brain in function, I don't know what could. It's a great explanation.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh, all right.
And so what you're finding in going out in the world, from your description of you started speaking and doing all this thing, you're finding that the world is starting to become maybe a little more inclusive and trying to understand people, and and develop their strengths and utilize them like that. What made you want to get into psychiatry? Was it from your experience of growing up with ADHD and people not understand you, and maybe you were like, want to understand myself, or did you have a different purpose?
I mean, it's definitely, that's a big piece of it.
Mhm.
And, I think you want to be the adult you wish you had as a kid.
There you go.
And it's funny because I don't actually live that. Both of my parents were psychologists as well.
Oh,
My
really?
parents knew
There you
what to look for, and they supported me really well.
Uh-huh.
But I looked around and saw kids who didn't have what I had.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, all right, there's a lot of kids out there who need somebody like me.
Mhm.
And, it allows me to get in there and educate the parents and educate the schools and educate the communities and also help the kid, because smart doesn't mean your life is easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a thing people don't understand.
In fact, it's harder because, as George Carlin said, think how dumb the average person is and realize 50% of the people are stupider than that. So if you're really smart, it's hard because you have to deal with, well, the other 50% of people who are dumber than the average.
Yeah.
But none of those people listen to this show. It's only
No,
the
no.
50% that do.
Yeah, this is a very discerning audience.
It is actually. It
You're
is
the
actually. I've
fine wine of the
I've driven
podcast.
off the stupid people for 16 years, and it seems to be working. So there you go. But so what was it like growing up with two psychologist parents? Was it harder? Did they understand your ADHD?
Yes and no. I mean, there's the hardest thing about living with ADHD is everyone can understand that it means sustaining attention is hard, and
Mhm.
everyone means that disorganization and time blindness are parts of that experience. But now we understand a lot more of the emotionality of that,
Mm.
and how there's a phenomenon called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD.
Oh, really?
And the idea is that ADHD kids get somewhere around 17 times more negative feedback than their neurotypical peers.
Hmm.
So, not quite your podcast numbers, but still pretty impressive.
Yeah, we're getting there.
And so, your brain, which is wired to look for threat in your environment, starts anticipating more negative comments, more rejection. So, you get
Mhm.
more sensitive to that. And then you have a dysphoric or not happy response to it. So, the ADHD brain, and really neurodivergent brains in general, though this tends to show up mostly in ADHD, is this idea of I'm looking in the environment for people to be upset with me, and then I'll get upset at the idea that they're upset with me, even if they're not, right? So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Hmm.
Because if you're stomping around being like, "Why are you mad at me?" The person you're talking to is like, I'm not mad at you." You're like, "Yeah, so you're acting like you're mad at me." You're like, "I'm not mad at you, dude." It's like your voice is changing. "Well, now I'm mad at you because you keep saying you're mad at me." And the
And
next thing you know, they're actually mad at you.
huh. And does the scanning help in, one of the things about ADHD is we're really good at strategy, and we're
Mhm.
really good. I actually, I should just speak for myself. We're really good at strategy and mapping. Is part of the mapping of looking for that part of, I don't know, what how does some of these things transform into the CEO disease that makes us so great at business?
It's all about how much scaffolding you can put around you to
Hmm.
manage that stuff. Because if
Okay.
you've got teachers and coaches and therapists and friends who get that,
Hmm.
they're gonna be like, "No, no, no, dude, you're gonna spin out. You're fine." And you're
Hmm.
like, "Okay, like I just need someone to tell me I'm fine." Right? Cool. Just like the CEO doesn't worry about whether the janitor is mopping the baseboards in the women's bathroom in the first floor. The CEO is worried about the high level, big picture, 30,000-foot view things.
Yeah.
That's what plays to the ADHD strength, right? I'm
Yeah.
an idea guy,
Hmm.
right? I was in grad school, I was our student body president, and my my wife was our whom I met in grad school was our vice president. And when we did awards at the end of the year, I gave her the neck award because yes, I'm the head of the organization, but the head can't survive
Oh,
without the neck,
that's true.
right? It's like I'm the one. I was like, guys, I have these great ideas, and we're going to do these things, and they're going to be awesome. And then my wife would put the paperwork down, like, and look, I filled out the form so we can actually do his ideas. I'm like, thank you, honey. that's why the ADHDer can be the CEO,
Yes.
but you need people who are going to, you need a good team around you.
You
Right.
need
And
those accountant types that can be the stable.
tell
Do
me
the
about
things.
it. Right.
See, I was really lucky in how I fell into this. Me and my friend had been friends since we were 12 in junior high, and I was always the ADH idea guy, and he was a very simple dude who he could be the accountant sort of person, and he could do the mundane, the repetitive tasks that make me mental, but I could be the visionary. And after somewhere in our about 10 years probably after we met, in our around 22, I think I was, or I don't, he might have been 22. Anyway, I don't know why I'm going on about this. But somewhere around 22, we started our first company together. I'd had a few companies before that, but this was the first real one that was the home runner. And we started an empire of companies that ran for 13 years with him and I together, and further for me. And we had a great team because we'd been friends forever. We could trust each other beyond a shadow of a doubt. And then I could be the visionary, the CEO, and come up with all the crazy ideas and build models and stuff like that. And he could be the one who could apply it. And
Yep.
so I never really given thought to the setup of it. Like, should this be a business setup that should work? It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And so you're right, that whole neck part and having the, the grounding, if you will, or the people who can take those ideas and make them work to the 70% of the weird people who aren't in the exceptional class.
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
You can do it. So, but it's great that these, we've had a lot of friends that are neurodivergent that have been on multiple times. I've got a lot of friends who are autistic, and they're out sharing the message of, the spectrum and the importance of these people. And I learned a long time ago in my companies, very early on, that I was not the purveyor of every greatest idea in the world. In fact, some ideas are quite painfully expensive in losses. Well, thankfully, I hit more home runs than I hit whiffs. I had to learn that there's ideas that come from everywhere, and there's no human being that doesn't have the ability, I think, to come up with great ideas if they're given the opportunities. And you just never know. I mean, the head of Google right now grew up on a dirt floor in India. He was born on and raised that way, dirt poor. Steve Jobs was an immigrant, a family of immigrants who came from, I think was it Iran or Iraq or one of those places, Pakistan. It came from somewhere. It came from somewhere. There's no corner on great ideas, and to throw people away or dismiss them or be prejudiced against them because, like, well, they're not like us. And you're just like, you watch the Kardashians all day long. Like, give me a break.
Right. miss me with that, please, would you?
Yeah, we lost the Kardashian crowd a long time ago. So.
Yeah. Oh no. I'm so sad. Well, and that's sort of the next step in my professional evolution, is doing more stuff with companies and organizations, because we have this pervasive idea that kids, and I'm going to use giant air quotes here, outgrow their neurodivergence when they turn 18, but that's convenient for the system because that's when we have to stop supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I have neurodivergent kids who are navigating college who are doing it by hooks and crooks and lots of caffeine, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things, like those kids are growing up, graduating through the schools, getting master's degrees, getting advanced degrees, getting jobs, starting families with the same brain. So we need to find parenting strategies that work for ADHDers. We need to find dating strategies that work for autistic people. We need to find ways to help dyslexic people at work. And you can switch around the neurodivergent pieces like we're playing 3-card Monty, but the idea is still the same.
Yeah.
So now I can go into an organization and say, listen, you're an organization of X number of people, which means by the numbers, you have Y number of neurodivergent people here on staff. You don't create an environment that is inclusive to that, those people are going to suffer in silence. And you're going to follow them because you're like, well, it's weird how Johnny can't keep his 16 F forms in order. We should fire him. Whereas
Yeah.
maybe Johnny's a great sales guy who's drowning in the mailroom.
Yeah.
Right?
You can't do that to your salespeople. Those
You
people are
can't.
special. They understand human nature, and you can't you TPS the report out of those folks, and you're gonna kill your sales. Yeah.
Now, would you say you've been missing a lot of work lately?
Yeah, I love that movie, Office Space. If you're not familiar with the TPS report reference, so you mentioned something about parenting, and I think this is something that's also in your field, is helping parents understand their children on top of CEOs and business people as well. Talk to us a little bit about why that's important. That parents need to understand, neurodiversity in their children, and how just because the kid's ADHD doesn't mean he's acting out or he's a bad child.
Yeah. So I often think about this. I worked with a family once who the mom was very frazzled that the house was messier than she wanted it to be, and all she wanted was for kids to pitch in. And she was like, "Well, so I created a system for my kid to organize her room and put things in places, and all these things are going to be fine." And I'm just so mad because she won't listen to me. She's not doing this system. So I let the mom sort of go on this rant for a while, and then I said, "Okay, so this is a really great area for us to intervene on. Remind me, how old is your daughter?" And she goes, "She's 9." And I was like, "Ma'am, I'm going to say this from a place of love, but there's no way a 9-year-old can do this system that you're talking about. That's way too abstract for a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
This is a 9-year-old with an IQ of 147. Like, this is a brilliant 9-year-old."
Yeah.
And we forget, when you've got neurodivergent people, we tend to treat them simultaneously at the highest strengths and their lowest weaknesses. So it's this weird dichotomy of like, why are you so great and why do you suck so much? Where it's like, let's not forget, she's 9, right? And
Yeah.
yes, this
She's still a
kid
child.
still a child, right?
Yeah.
So like, if the pants aren't alphabetized, nobody loses. Is she old enough to put the pants in the pants drawer? Absolutely. So let's start there, and then we can build upwards towards something a little bit more elaborate. And the
There you
mom,
go.
you could tell it was like a really seminal moment for the mom, because she had gotten sucked into this highest highs narrative, and the kid was a great kid, is a great kid, and I mean, it's the thing. If we don't meet people where they are, we are going to constantly lose them for the spiky parts of their narrative, right? That's good or bad. You can't shame someone into changing. You've got to meet them where they are and guide them towards where we need to go,
I think
right?
that's a real important message you're saying right there.
I mean,
Meeting
that's
people where they are and understanding. It sounds like the mother has a certain type of brain or pattern or mapping that she has. It sounds like she's trying to force adulthood on a kid, really.
yep.
I mean, there's, someone told me I never had kids because I don't like them. But no, I like kids. I just don't like changing diapers. I'm not doing it, and I like sleep too much. I really enjoy sleep, and I enjoy money and having it. So there you go. So somebody said parenting is like parenting with kids is like standing in a window and throwing your money out the window all the time. But jokes aside, folks, it's you try and force. Someone told me a long time ago a really important thing about kids that I used in my pseudo stepdadding I've had to be exposed to, and they go, you make a hallway for kids, but you have to make it wide enough to where they can bounce around and they can figure stuff out and they can learn and they can be kids. But there has to be some containment, but you can't make it like a straitjacket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The term I use for that is backyarding.
Backyarding. There you go.
Right? Because when I was a kid and super high energy and always was creating things, sometimes I drove my mom crazy. So she would just say, "Go play in the backyard," which had a fence around it. And it was a big rectangular backyard. We grew up in a nice town. And like, then I could play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or climb trees or fight bears. But I was not going to get hit by a car because there was a fence around the backyard. So I still call it this. I call it backyarding because kids need room to play and get messy and test boundaries.
Use their imagination too, especially super
Absolutely.
important. Yeah.
We have bled the joy, the color out of childhood
Oh
because
yeah.
we want kids to be little adults.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean, they've taken away, I think, recess in a lot of schools now too. And you're
I,
like, what the hell? That's
I,
that's a time when you go blow out your ADHD energy and wear yourself out for school.
I mean, the recess has decreased across the nation by 82% in the last
Wow.
10 years.
It's crazy.
82%. That's, I mean,
Dude, I was a rocket ship going on to school with recess.
right. I mean, when I talk to administrators, I'm like, listen, I get that you think taking away recess is a good punishment. You are making everybody's lives harder if you
Amen.
don't let that ADHD kid run around at lunchtime.
Yeah.
Like make them write extra stuff, or like we'll come up with something creative, right? But I mean, I had a kid I worked with once, brilliant runner, ADHD as long as the day was long, and his principal was like, I'm sick of his acting out. We're gonna take away cross country. I'm like, if you do that, he'll never come back to school. You'll lose him.
Yep.
And he's like, well, maybe that's what he deserves because school's not about cross country.
Wow.
Listen, objectively, you're right. But also, if you want the kid to be the best version of himself, he's got to be able to move his body enough that he can learn.
Yeah.
And brain and body are so interrelated, and we tend not to see it that way.
Yeah. And I mean, so many great CEOs. I mean, we're talking people who are on the top echelons of companies, so many great entrepreneurs, the people who change the world. We're all ADHD. There's a reason they call it the CEO disease.
Mm-hmm.
And without us, I think this world would be very freaking boring, different, and lame, and we'd probably all just be IBM men. I think there would be less innovation, less success in the world. I mean, I think, I don't know if someone's ever done a profile on like the top people on the Forbes 400, but I imagine a lot of them, if they didn't inherit money, and even if they did, they probably still ADHD because the pressure. And you know, it's a disease that makes, you know, I've learned to embrace it and love it and go, how do we roll with this? And you're right. You mentioned something earlier that I did want to expand on. You know, I'm 56. I still have ADHD. It died off a little bit when my testosterone dropped, evidently in the last few years. But I recently got testosterone therapy, and I'm using this as an ad to say check your testosterone if you're a man above 40. But man, it's back like a vengeance, that TRT, now that they leveled off my oil. Yeah, it's back. 56 years old, and I still got it, so it doesn't go away. But you got to learn to ride it like a wave.
Yeah. And if you can have an environment that understands that, so you meet them at step 8 and you don't have to start at step 1 every single time, because that's exhausting.
Yeah.
Right. You know, the ADHDer doesn't want to have to tell the whole story every single time over and over and over and over and over. What they need is an environment that you can say, I'm having a bad ADHD day, and they go, cool, how can I support you?
There you go.
And whether that's true, whether you're 6, 16, 26, or 66, right? And, you know, and as we embrace this neurodiversity movement, you know, people are raising their hands at work. They're being brave and vulnerable, and they're saying, yeah, listen, I had an IEP as a kid, and I still need that kind of support. Can I get that at work? And I'm like, absolutely, you can. I mean, we can talk to HR, we can talk to your DEIB people. You know, I have a lot of DEI workers reach out to me on like LinkedIn and say, how do we have these conversations at our law firms, at our pharmaceutical companies, I'm so excited to work with. There's a auto repair shop by me who just reached out. They're like, we think we got a lot of these neurodivergence here. Help us. And I'm like, because I mean, think about it. Who's really good with their hands and not so great with the social skills, if we're speaking broadly, right?
Yeah.
It's a traditional autistic profile, right? How do we support those people? You know, and they're not actually my repair shop. I feel a little bit bad about it. But I'm like, absolutely, we'll get in there and we'll talk about what this stuff looks like and feels like. Because once we know, we can empower people, right? My aunt always said, do as well as you can until you know better, and then do better. right?
Yep. Yep. You know, I didn't know what ADHD was, and in my age of the 90s, you know, this wasn't anxiety and different things weren't really talked about. I think depression. I think you knew what depression was, but it wasn't in the societal norm of culture, at least not the one I was a part of. And so when I started, I had always been ADHD. When I was young, I would check the door 20 times at night to make sure it was locked, even though I checked it 20 times. You know, I was one of those kids. My brother, I think, would wash his hands till they bled, you know, that sort of shit. And so we had ADHD pretty bad. I would drum on my desk in school and be yelled at constantly for not paying attention and not getting good grades, whatever. But I would think about things that were really important, that shaped my life, and thank God for that. But yeah, I mean, back then we still had a lot of men in schools, and even the men would still struggle with me. Nowadays, there's a real problem where it's just mostly women running schools, and boys are being treated as dysfunctional girls, which is a real problem. And we've had a lot of psychologists and authors on. Please go Google that data. And in fact, if anything, if you have boys nowadays, you have to kind of look at certain schools and what to put them in that understand what boys are going through. I think some of your comments from principals and stuff, I think a lot of that's where that's coming from, understanding what men are going through, and ADHD boys, people on the spectrum, all of these things, they're just trying to cram them into one model fits all. And usually it's a dysfunctional girl model. Like, you just need to be like the girls. You need to calm down. You need not act out. You need not be boys. And you're like, genetically, we're boys. Roll with it, honey.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And I think that's being lost more so in our education system than ever before. And probably, I think companies are really great at DIY or DEI programs,
Yeah.
diversity, inclusion, and stuff. Sometimes I think it can go too far. I'm not a big fan of what's the thing that they do with the slights, and the microaggression stuff. That's going too far. Stop it. That's too much. That's emotionalism. But there's a way to make this balance where we appreciate people. As a CEO, you know, you have to get in people's heads and understand them, figure them out, bring out the best of them. As a manager, you have to do the same. If you're working with other people, you need to understand the people you're working with. You can't dismiss certain people and just go, well, this person, you know, they're just not as bright because, I don't know, they drum on their desk or they behave in a way that I don't fully understand. You know, all of my employees that I always had to learn that they were all different, and that I had to understand each one of them, their psychology, sometimes their psychosis. I had to understand my own psychosis, and that made it so that I could tap into them for the best and help them achieve what they wanted to do, and thereby help achieve what I wanted to do in servant leadership. And that it's just so important, and you can't dismiss anyone nowadays unless they're really, really stupid. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just being a shit. But you know, everyone has their own thing, and you've got to, you know, when you're running giant companies and even small companies, you've got to understand how your people operate and how to get the best out of them, and how to help them achieve what they want to achieve. And if they feel like they're a part of your big vision and your thing, then you're gonna have a better chance of achieving it than just trying to, I don't know, ram it down everyone's throat, like I've mentioned in the one size fits all education system.
I mean, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and I think within that paradigm of, you know, like treating people as people with different needs, right?
Mhm.
I would respectfully tweak what you said.
Mhm.
And the idea is like, I almost find it more helpful to talk about it in terms of like energy levels, like extroverts and introverts,
Mhm.
right? Because like, I'm a guy who presents in some atypical ways for masculinity, right? Like, I was a theater kid,
Mhm.
right? There were people who were like, "Oh, so you're gay? What's your boyfriend's name?" And I'm like, "No, I'm
Because
not
you were
gay."
in theater, they assumed you.
Right. And so it's
Yeah.
like there's got to be room for that kind of masculinity. Just like, I mean, and this is sort of a funny side to that. Like, one of the girls I dated in high school was a really amazing basketball player. She played pro basketball in Europe. And it was like, people were like, "Oh, so could you beat her one-on-one?" I was like, "She is a professional basketball
Yeah,
player.
she plays. That's her
Like,
job.
she wiped the floor with me."
Yeah,
Like,
like,
you know, so like there needs to be room for putting, like I say, let's not jam people into boxes.
Yeah.
Meet people where they're learn about them, like you said, and say,
Learn about
oh,
their strengths.
right. Put them in areas that play to their strengths
Mhm.
and shuffle them away from areas that drag them down, that punch holes in their bucket.
Yeah.
Because then no matter how you walk through those doors, I'm putting you in positions to, to be successful. Right. And,
Yeah.
like I said, the CEO of Google, grew up on a dirt floor, right? There's a lot of closed-minded people out there who'd be like, that person could never be a CEO.
Yeah.
Who the heck says not, right? Who says no?
Yeah.
If you're capable, then
Mhm.
you deserve every right, every opportunity to go to the highest place you can fly.
Mhm.
And that to me is at the heart of what I do, because it's so easy to internalize all this misinformation and bad science, and like the old like, well, this is just, you're just not trying hard enough. Well, you know what, I don't know a lot of ADHDers who don't try hard.
Yeah.
A lot of
And
ADHDers who don't try smart, and that's a different thing. But
there you go. And I mean, there's a lot of successful autistic people. One other thing you talk about too, I see here, is dyslexia. There's a ton of like super successful people that have dyslexia.
oh yeah,
I mean, we could go down the list. I mean, Oprah Winfrey, I think. I mean, you could go down the whole list of stars and people and success. I mean, it's well, how do we overcome this, because there's a lot of diversity, inclusion and stuff going on and stuff, but at the core of our human nature, it seems like we have some real problems with prejudice and jumping to conclusions, and I think part of it is wired into our monkey brain, our caveman brain, where we're designed to try and make quick assessments of people to, determine whether we're in fight or flight mode in some sort of tribal caveman dinosaur society. I'm just joking around. People don't write me. The cavemans and dinosaurs probably weren't together. I know that. But you had to determine, okay, is the man, woman, or creature coming at me a fight or flight situation? Are they a danger? Are they a threat? Are they a friend? What sort of response do you need to merit? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm floating this theory out there, I think the problem with that is it's expanded to a point that we use it for a lot of quick judgment, a lot of discrimination, a lot of different other issues that we're trying to deal with diversity and inclusion, people of the LGBT community, autism, dyslexia, giftedness, ADHD, all the things we're talking about, and probably everything else, racism, all the different biases that we have, where we slight human beings and sometimes we're horrible to them. Is that really what we kind of have to constantly fight at our core? That nature of us that causes this prejudice.
I mean, you said it beautifully. I mean,
Mhm.
when we were cavemen running through the jungle and you heard something rustling in the bushes, that threat detection system kicks in and says, run. Those
Mhm.
people stayed alive and protected their genetic code.
Yep.
The people who were like charged into the bushes after them, sometimes they got lunch and sometimes they were lunch.
Mhm.
Right. And this is
Darwinism.
actually, this is actually one of the talks I give, all
Mhm.
about managing anxiety, right? It's not about curing it. It's not about overcoming it. It's about finding ways to make it work for you, right? So
Mhm.
we've got these incredible threat detection systems, but they are absolutely wired for living on the African savannah 300,000 years ago. They're not so much wired for, I didn't get as many mentions on TikTok as I wanted to,
Mhm.
right? But that system cascades and doesn't know any better. It's like, I'm in danger. Ah!
Yeah.
So, so one of the things that we do is when things show up as different or unexpected, our brains say it's a lot easier to just slam the door on that, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. And then because our brains like to be right, our
Mhm.
brains seek out information that proves us right.
Yeah.
You know,
The
and
recirculating activating system,
mhm,
where we collect data to support whatever sort of crazy bullshit we believe.
mhm,
I've always been enthralled by that. I grew up in a cult, and so I knew it was bullshit from the time I was 3. Somehow I was born a king, where I just certain things. And that, or I figure them out as a survival mode of ADHD is probably more accurate. But we'll go with the king thing first, because I'm narcissistic and dark triad traits are how I learned to survive. And they feel really good. I mean, they might be dark triad, but they're really enjoyable sometimes. Anyway, folks, but so I've studied why people believe things from the beginning of time. Why can a person come up with a belief that there are blue Martians living amongst us, or lizard people, and then they can expand it into whole ideology where they have books and knowledge and all the supporting biases that are built from that reticular activating system that collects the data that they have. And yeah, it's really interesting to me. The other part of it is too, it's kind of lazy thinking, right? When you look at somebody and you hold certain biases, it's kind of just a way to be freaking lazy, so you don't have to learn anything. Maybe too. I don't know. Is that true, or are just people just content in their bias?
It's less lazy. It's the fancy psychology word for it is egosyntonic, which basically means, if you love, if you love a particular actor, and you spend a lot of time and money watching this actor's movies, and then somebody's like, "Hey, man, you heard that he's an awful person, right? He does all these terrible things." Your brain goes, "Well, I don't want to believe that because I've already spent all this time and money liking this guy,
And he
so
seems so wonderful being on camera, right?
right? So I'm just going to ignore that, push it away, because it challenges this thought in a way that feels very uncomfortable to me."
The uncomfortableness.
Yeah. And our brains like to be right, but their primary job is to protect us.
Yeah.
So it's the sort of thing, like the language I often use to talk about this is what we call first thought, second thought, right? So if you're walking down a street and you see a dog in an alley and it's growling, and your first thought goes, "Oh, danger."
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes your first thought's right and you should run away.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you stick around like, what's my second thought here? And you realize the dog is growling because its leash is stuck under a dumpster, and it's growling to get somebody's attention because, hey, I'm stuck. So you go over and the dog tackles you and is licking your face like, oh, and you go return it to its owner, right? So, I mean, I took my kids on a walk the other day, and and I think like a lot of us neurodivergent people, we put out this sort of vibe, and like other neurodivergents like see us like, to make a very nerdy reference, like, the beacons are lit, Gondor calls for aid, right? And I'm walking through the forest with my kids, and this little girl comes up to me and she starts rattling off information about the font on the signs in this park. And of course, I'm vibing it. I'm like, let's go. Right. And her dad goes, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Hey," I literally said, it was like, "Listen, first thought, second thought." Because yes, I'm this guy in my real life. I'm like, first thought, there's a kid I don't know running at me. Second thought is, oh, she's sharing a thing she's super passionate about. And the guy literally was like, do you have a card? like, and it's one of those things, like, if you can tolerate that moment of discomfort, so many more people and experiences become available to you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because you're pushing back on that part of your body that goes, if you do this, you're absolutely going to die.
Yeah.
Like, well, actually, probably not.
Yeah, I tuned in this really hard. My audience has heard me talk about it over the years, but after something that happened in 2016, I was trying to figure out why. I was trying to figure out the terms of white nationalism and what this was, and it was rebranded KKK. And I was trying to figure out these terms that they were using that I used. I mean, I didn't use them specifically, but every now and then I reference one, like culture. And I'm like, well, culture's culture, right? And turns out their version's a little different.
Maybe
a little coded, maybe. Our culture doesn't mean like everyone's culture. Big surprise there, people. Anyway, I was trying to figure these things out. And I was like, I think I don't have a lot of biases and prejudices. And I started, and I came with this system. I just kind of made it up in my head where I was like, you know what? Let's see if I still have any biases, because I've been using some of these words these people are using, and I don't really want to use these words anymore because I'm getting thrown in with them if I do. And so I started I started doing this experiment, and I don't know if there's anything that triggered it that was like, hey, here's an experiment you should do. But I was like, let's find out if I have more biases than I think I do. And so I started doing a thought experiment where every time I go to the store in Las Vegas, I would listen to my thoughts on that fight or flight mode, where I would determine the faces that I saw, the people I saw, what my initial impressions were. And it was eye-opening. Like, I remember I saw a guy who was a big white guy who probably looks like me, and he had a Harley Davidson jacket on, and had the Harley Davidson sort of rough guy gang look, and man, I came up with some things on him, and because I've hung out with Harley Davidson dudes when I was young, and then my brain would listen to itself, and I'd be like, well, what the fuck did you just come up with? I mean, you don't know if that Harley Davidson guy's ever been in prison. You don't know if he's carrying a weapon. You know anything about? He just might be a nice guy who just kind of likes the look. He's probably not selling meth. Like were you coming up with some of these things? And I would go through that as I would go through the store, and I would question my assumptions and be like, yeah, the stuff you're coming up with in your head is insane, dude. You have no idea who this person is, or what their background is, or anything. You have no idea. And look at these thoughts that you're coming up with. And here I thought I was pretty, didn't have a lot of biases and prejudices and discrimination stuff. The stuff I would come up with is like insane. And I'm just like, dude, you need to calm the hell down with some of these assumptions you're making. You don't know who people are.
Yeah.
And that's why I love the show, is I get to get people on the show and learn who people are, and I enjoy learning from people. But yeah, it was a great experiment to learn from. Everyone should go through it, I think, in my idea.
Yeah.
There you go. So let's wrap up the show. We've been having a lot of fun with this. We normally don't go this long, but we've had a great time. So give us your final offer to people on what people can get at your website, what people can do to utilize your services, et cetera, et cetera.
So the idea, I guess the number one thing is, the world is built for neurotypical people because there's a lot more of them than there are of us.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a manager, or if you're a principal of a school, or if you have a very large family and you're like, what you're talking about doesn't describe me, but it describes people I care about, people who are in my orbits, then I would very much invite you to talk to me, because the idea that meeting these people where they are and giving them their own weirdly shaped holes to fit into, rather than trying to cram all these round pegs into square holes, then you're giving those people the best chance to contribute to these circles that they operate in, whether that's work or school or community service or whatever it might be. And when you play to people's strengths, it becomes a rising tide that lifts all boats.
There you go. A rising tide.
Everybody does better when we play to people's strengths, and think about the times in your life where people accommodated something you're not so good at, or worked with you, and you're going to realize people have done that for you and it helped you. And if you have an atypical brain trying to make it in a society not built for you, you can make the connection that, oh, wow, if me with my regular brain benefited from this, someone with an atypical brain would logically benefit much more from it. And we don't need everybody to sit in their own little palace, right? Most of the changes we make are simple and cheap, if not free, and based from a place of compassion and understanding. And I mean, I don't have hard numbers on this, but every time we invest in this, every time we make somebody's life a little easier, it back 1,000%. I mean, it is just happier kids, happier people, for happier, more productive organizations, and everybody wins.
There you go. So give people your final thoughts and pitch out on what they can do by hiring you, how they can hire you, how they can reach out to you on your website, et cetera, et cetera.
So yeah, it's www.drmattzakreski.com. And I'm very Googleable because I have a very unique name. So just punch Dr. Matt Zakreski into Google or Spotify, and then I'd pop up a lot of places. But the biggest thing is that the more we know, the better we can do. And it doesn't matter if you're coming at this from a place of, I raised 6 ADHD kids, I get it, I want to tweak what I know, or like, I'm not even sure if this whole ADHD thing's not a myth, but he made some decent points, and I want to learn a little bit more about that. my job, the reason I'm on this planet is to help people live better lives. And when that starts from a place of brain science, then we know more, we do better, and everybody improves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, it's a pretty good calling, and I like doing it, and I like to think I'm pretty good at it. So
there you go. And they can reach out to your website. Give us the website one more time.
So for speaking, it's drmattzakreski.com. For therapy, it's the neurodiversitycollective.com. Two hats, two companies, but CEO mindset, right? Living that life.
There you go. ADHD.
Why would I focus on one thing?
Why do one company when you can do a bunch? Yeah. That's how I roll.
I always order flights of beer. I can't ever choose one thing. So
that's true. Yeah, but that's a good thing. Flights of beer.
Yeah, I agree.
Beer's necessary. So thank you very much for coming on the show. This has been a really brilliant discussion. The funds that we have, the ones that go along. So thank you very much for coming on, Matthew. We really appreciate it.
Well, Chris, it was a pleasure. You're an awesome host, and I mean, I thought we got a lot done, which is pretty cool.
There you go. We educated the people. Now go out there, folks, and quit being discriminatory to everybody and play on people's strengths. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss one, the TikTokity, and all those crazy places we are on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.